Okay. So I want to welcome everyone to the Creatives Roundtable. I'm your host, Nancy Russo. I can't even pronounce my own name. For those of you who are new here, the Creatives Roundtable is an accountability group that meets monthly in online groups of 6 people to help you with the business side of your creative business by breaking your goals into bite-sized tasks that are manageable, talking through hot topics, and getting feedback from one another. Registration is closed at this time, but if you can dip your toe in our groups, by joining our private Facebook and Slack channels where conversations take place daily about work events, questions and answers, and what color are your office walls, which was a very hot topic recently. Once a month, but not in August, we have these CR 60-minute events with special speakers, and occasionally someone from within our community hosts a mini event called CR 15. In September, we have Terry Trespicio. Hold on, sorry, I have to admit someone. We have Terry Trespicio on content creation. In October, we have Madeline Schwartz in the Creatives Guide to Presenting Your Work. November, we have Jess Macta on the business side of running your business, aka operations. And we wrap up the year with Elise Benin on What the Hell Was 2020. And then we start off 2021 with Emily Cohen. I'm excited to have Melinda back, I think for the 3rd time, to talk about stop being an order taker and start being paid to think. Melinda is a brand strategist and online educator based in sunny California. She successfully went from charging $0 to $10,000 for brand strategy in less than a year and is going to share some of that magic with us. And at the end, Melinda has some information on her next course. So make sure you all stay muted. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and take it away, Melinda.
Thank you, Nancy. Oh, can I get access to screen sharing? Zoom. You're still muted, Nancy. Good? We're good. Thank you. Right. Okay, so this is my 3rd time here. So if you have been here and heard me talking about this from a previous Creative Roundtable, or you've seen a podcast or heard a podcast with me, this is probably not too new to you. And I wanted to hear, when we first were just hanging out at the beginning, I wanted to hear where everyone was at and what you guys do, because I don't want to make all these assumptions that you all are designers. So I did hear that there were a few of you who were business consultants and then a director of operations. So hopefully this will also be of help to you, especially if you work with designers. So you might not, if you are not a designer, this hopefully will give you perspective of what a designer might feel if you do not have a strategy, and then what you can do moving forward. And I say that because I got this text the other day from my friend Alyssa, and she just started it out with, "My soul is being crushed." And I knew that when she said this, there was something coming that came from a client. And I just had a feeling, because this is a friend. We used to work together back in our in-house days at Oakley, and we would always say that our design soul was being crushed. And typically it felt like it was being crushed when we got things like this, which this is something that she got from her client, and they started off the email with, "I'm having second thoughts." And he was talking directly about something that she had sent him, that they had agreed on the direction, and she went forward with it. And it was about a week into designing everything. And then he goes, "I'm having second thoughts." And then he goes into directing her on what he'd like her to do, which was just spend 90 minutes early this week, give us 3 of your best quick and dirty efforts. Don't overthink it. Just let your gut lead. And that's when she texted me, "My soul's being crushed. We already decided on this direction." And then all of a sudden he's coming in, disrespecting my craft and telling me, "Just give me something quick and dirty." And she says that he says this all the time. So it just was so annoying to her. And if you haven't heard something exactly like this, you may have heard, "Just have fun with it," especially if you're any type of creative, or if you work with creatives. I have been guilty of saying this to designers that I hire too. Just have fun with it. Or I've heard this even in my in-house days, "Just give us something that looks good. We just want it to look good." or I'll know it when I see it. And if you have worked in this industry for a while, hopefully you don't get this all the time, but you might, and I totally understand it. And that's why I want to talk to you guys about this today, because like my friend, it feels soul crushing. It feels so soul crushing when we hear these things, because it's purposeless. So I'll get into the problem too. When I talk about purposeless, it's as if we're aiming at a target that we don't even know if it's there, or does the client even know it's there? Do we know what we're aiming at? One time I was tasked with designing a logo, and this was in-house. And still, whether you're in-house, whether you own your own business, this can still happen. Well, we were tasked with redesigning the logo for this company, and they didn't give us any direction. They just said, we just want to redesign the logo. And we're like, okay, but why? And they didn't have any answer for us. We go through 600 iterations of a logo between 4 people. And when the director looked at it, he just goes, no, 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 but then never told us what we're aiming at. Why are we doing this? What are you looking for? What could we do better? Nothing. So we weren't even aiming at anything. We were just shooting into the wind. And that's what can happen in these types of situations. Usually this is what is happening when you're hearing things like, well, I'll know it when I see it, because obviously they don't know what they're looking for if they're saying things like that. So if that happens, and if you don't have a target, you don't know what you're aiming at, or people are not aligned towards the same goal, so there might be a goal in there somewhere, but it might not be communicated to you as the designer, then what happens? Well, you'll get a lot of subjective feedback. So those things like, well, my mom really likes the color red. Can we change it to red? I'm sure you might have heard horror stories, or you've experienced that yourself. Other things that can happen, low value projects. So you just keep getting these really low budget projects. Like I used to work on a lot of marketing material a few years ago, and it was just really low budget and quick things. It was not that fun. And I kept getting more and more of those types of projects. And then design lacks purpose. And this is something that for some designers, it can feel as if you're you're digging a ditch, and then you're just filling up the ditch again. And I think that's what my friend, when she texted me that her soul was being crushed, that's what she was feeling. Like, I'm doing this work and then we're changing it, but it's not even for a good reason. And so then it feels like I just dug that ditch and now you're telling me to go fill it up. And so you'll feel like just your design is lacking purpose, and what you're doing as a job at that point will feel like it has no purpose. And then if we follow this even further, which this is part of the name of the title of this talk, is you'll end up being positioned as an order taker. So you'll just be there asking your client, well, how big do you want the logo? And what does it need to say? And what color do you like? And you're just taking down the requests of your client without ever asking why. And not saying you're not asking why, but you might even be asking and they're not able to give you the answer. So what is a solution if you find yourself in this merry-go-round of subjective feedback and low budget projects and feeling as if you're just being told what to do all the time as an order taker? Well, first off, if you keep doing the same thing and you expect different results, that's the definition of insanity according to Albert Einstein. So there may be another way. You might want to try something different, and that's why I'm here to introduce you to a possible perspective if you haven't already considered it, and you might already have considered it or switched to using a brand strategy workshop at the beginning of your engagement, or requiring that your client already has a brand strategy done before requesting any deliverables from you. So there's a couple different ways of doing this. It doesn't mean you have to add this to your services if that's not what you want, but it does help in guiding the whole direction of the brand. So if a company has a brand strategy, then any deliverable that is created after will align with a common goal. And so this is something just to be aware of and to possibly consider in case you are having those issues about subjective feedback and all the other things we mentioned, that this might be something that your client it could benefit the company that you're working for, your client, or if you're in-house anywhere, it might help. So things like subjective feedback turns into objective direction. So when someone says, I want to change something, you can then go back to the strategy and say, well, this was the goal that we were trying to achieve. This is how we said we were going to do it. Is there a reason why we're changing it? So then any feedback actually turns from subjectivity to objectivity. So if you get some subjective feedback, you can refer back to that strategy and say, well, this is what we were trying to do. Does that new change that you're wanting to do align with what we were aiming at? And then your low budget projects actually turn into high value projects, because with brand strategy, you're actually solving a business problem, a very large business problem. And then your purposeless design actually turns into purpose-driven design. So like I said, with the objective direction, when someone asks for a change, then you can together look at that strategy and say, well, does it line up with what we were trying to accomplish? And if it doesn't, do we really need to do that? And should we really do it? Or is it just because you like the color purple? So if we get into what's the process, because I know I just dipped my toe into talking about a brand strategy workshop and having a brand strategy workshop. So the brand strategy, it actually should be just workshop, is how my process goes. And this is different depending on who you ask, but my process is a 1 to 2 day workshop. Now we meet on Zoom. It used to be mostly in person. And later we give a summary of insights and next steps, which would be the actual roadmap. And the goal of doing this is very simply help your client get to where they want to go in their business, because they're here, wherever here is, they want to be somewhere else. And Marty Neumeier, if you guys have watched The Future, Marty Neumeier was on The Future with Christo, and something that I think they were talking about, the ROI of branding. And he said that really you can measure it. It does take a long time to measure the ROI of branding, but over time, you're going to see more customers at a premium price for a longer period of time. So typically when I said they're here and they want to go there, for brand strategy, it will solve, this is what the goal is of brand strategy, is to help them get more customers at a premium price for a longer period of time. So if we just break down what strategy, just strategy, not brand strategy, what strategy is, it's going from point A to point B and marking off all of the steps in between. So you have where you're at right now, where you want to go, and the steps that are between. So if we think of that in the terms of brand strategy, we have the brand, we have the super fan, which I used to say it was ideal client, but that never really resonated with my client, because they always said, well, I want to attract more people than just one type of person. When I said a super fan, then that made them think, oh, that's that one person that's going to be referring me and giving me great reviews. And they were able to think of it as just a one type of person. So we have the brand, we have the super fan, and we have all of the steps that need to be taken to create a very nice love relationship between the two. So you could think of yourself as a matchmaker of sorts, that you are helping to uncover all of the great things about the brand, all of the great things about the super fan, and what do you need to do and alter about the brand or communicate through the brand that will connect with that super fan. So I've thought about this, about the whole idea of branding is like matchmaking from Yo Santosa. She also had a talk in The Future with Christo, and she was saying about how it's branding is matchmaking, and that's really what we're doing. We're making the brand attractive to the super fan. So in these types of brand strategy workshops, we are trying to discover who each side, the brand and the super fan, who they are. And then what does the relationship look like between the two? What types of deliverables need to be created to create that emotional connection between the two? And what are our next steps moving forward? So really, if you're a designer and you're used to just executing on a brief, this is what needs to happen to actually write the briefs. So it's a couple steps prior to when you would receive a brief from a client to execute on deliverable. And again, it doesn't mean you have to incorporate this into your services. It just I would love to just help you be aware of this, that if you're having those subjective issues or feedback from your client, that you could suggest that they do get a brand strategy done so that you can have better direction, just so that you're aware of this. Because I've had some clients come to me through friends who do things like social media, other designers who said, you know what, I can't work with you, client, just yet because we need more direction. So go and get brand strategy done and then come to me after for the execution of the deliverables. And if you start forming relationships with brand strategists, then that's also potential for a lot more leads. If you're in need of some work and some leads, I highly suggest connecting with a brand strategist and seeing if you can form some type of referral relationship so that you each can do what you do best, and then help your client get the best results. The basic outline, this is just really boiled down. I have a lot of different exercises I use in brand strategy, but if we were to just boil it down, things that we go over in the workshop would be, who are you, as in the brand? What's your purpose? Why do you do what you do? Backstory, perhaps. Who needs to know? So who's that super fan? Who are the people that you want to attract? Why should they care? So is that brand creating something that people are even going to care about and need? So is it validated? Do we need to validate it? And then how will they find out about you? And this is the beginnings of a customer journey. So the awareness portion. So how are they even going to find out that you exist? These are the basic things that we go over in brand strategy. This was specifically taken from Designing Brand Identity by Alina Wheeler. So if you wanted to go more in depth, it's a great book that outlines branding. So if you're thinking about this, about possibly incorporating it into your own services, you might have some doubts about it, which I completely understand. Things like who's going to actually pay for this, and in this time of the pandemic, and with businesses just not being where they used to be at and not maybe having the funds that they used to have. And this was something that just recently, one of the students that I work with, she messaged, and I thought this was such a cool realization, that she said before she was leading with ego and now she leads with curiosity, which helped her go from $0 to $5,000 for brand strategy. She had this huge mindset shift during the course, that she realized that it was more about her just asking questions. And you'll see later on what I mean by that, but just being there to understand her client and where they're at and where they want to go, and not trying to just sell her deliverables, but just being curious about her client. And there are people that are willing to pay for strategy. I mean, anyone who wants to get somewhere else than where they're currently at can benefit from strategy. I even hire strategists for my own business. So even though I'm a strategist, I can't see everything. And I need some extra eyes. I need some people to ask me really good questions. And so I myself even hire out too. Another thing you might ask yourself is, don't I need to be the expert? Because that's a lot of pressure to come in where you used to, especially if you were an order taker, it's more comfortable to just ask the client, well, just what do you want? Like, what can I do? How big do you want the logo? And it gets really nerve-wracking to then come in and say, well, I'm a consultant now. I'm going to help you with your brand strategy. So this idea of like, well, I have to be this expert. What if they ask me something I don't know? And something I was talking to Michelle about recently, she said, I don't need to be the expert. So she realized this. She realized that the client is the expert and she is just there to pull the details out of them and then make those connections between the two. So she didn't have to come in. I mean, she's the expert brand strategist, but she doesn't have to be the expert in whatever industry or whatever thing the client is in, because she is there to facilitate that talk between them. So the client is the expert. You're there to uncover those golden nuggets. So the things that make the brand special, the things that are unique about the super fan, and how you can form that connection. That's really what you're there for. So you're there as a treasure hunter. Like, you're there to discover the unique qualities about those two two different, we'll say people, because a brand is like a person, to then create this emotional connection between the two. You're also there to help your client think and make decisions by asking great questions. This is more of a coach mindset. So if you are wanting to go from order taker to getting paid to think to being more of a consultant, then you're there really to just help your client think and make decisions. And you're there to ask great questions. And so if you are interested in this, I highly suggest checking out The Coaching Habit. And it's a book, and he's also the author has gone on a lot of podcasts. You can learn from him just about how to lead with curiosity, lead with asking questions, and help your client make decisions. Because when they're saying things like, oh, I'll know it when I see it, that tells me that they're not sure about what they're looking for ahead of time. Like, we need to know what we're looking for so that we can make better decisions. And so this process really helps your client make better decisions. The other thing is, and I kind of touched on it earlier, where it's hard to, like, I hire strategists to help me see things I can't, because it's hard to read the label from inside the jar. So you can be there to help ask questions to your client that will help them see something that maybe they didn't in their own business, or see an opportunity too, because in these conversations with your client, you might discover a new way of attracting the client, which then opens up for so many more deliverables that you could be working on. It might also open up, you'll discover that really this one thing that they thought was going to work is not the thing you guys should go towards. You actually should create something else. So I don't know how your relationships work with your clients, but if you've ever worked on something and then it just fell flat, like the client didn't use it, or it didn't do what they had hoped for, then doing something like this, like a strategy workshop, would really help. At least you put forward your best effort or hypothesis, instead of just assuming that, oh, we're just going to create this, let's say this website because, well, that's what everyone else is doing, so of course we need a website. But if you were to sit down with your client and say, well, client, your super fan is actually not even browsing online at all, they are more on face-to-face connections, let's just say, then you realize that maybe that deliverable that they were requesting, they just thought that they needed, but it's not truly what would attract that ideal client. And like I mentioned earlier, you're there to really facilitate. You're there to make things easier. You're there to help your client think and make decisions on what briefs should actually be written, what deliverables should actually be created, instead of coming in way later in the process and creating something that isn't going to get them where they want to go. If you also are thinking about incorporating this into your services, you might think, well, I don't have enough money to invest in learning a strategy framework. So there are different processes out there. There's tons of books out there. There's even free things you can, if you're really interested, you can go to giveall.io. If you want to learn about a strategy framework, they literally give all their whole framework for free. And we think that we need the process. We need the right process. We need a certificate. We need to be a certified brand strategist, and you need to know the right questions. We think we need to do all of the things, but I do want to encourage you that it's actually easier than you think. If you just go in empty, to learn, to ask questions, to ask why, you'll actually get way farther than if you came in so prepared with this whole process and all the right questions, and you're going to end up trying to fit your client into this box because you have all these exercises and questions and the process that you want to bring them through, instead of just sitting there and being present and hearing them and hearing where they're at, and then using whatever tools you've learned to say, okay, let me think. Knowing this problem, I'm going to go grab this one tool, this exercise, maybe this process, and we'll use it. Or I'm going to go grab this other thing. Or I don't really know the answer to that. Let me go see if I can find it. Coming in empty is your best tool. Come in empty, be present, free yourself of assumptions, expectations, advice giving, even your agenda. This will also help you in sales meetings. If you just go into a sales meeting completely free of all these expectations of, oh gosh, I need to land this project. And if you're just there to listen to your client and help them get to where they want to go, even if that means that they're not going to hire you and you have to refer them somewhere else because it's a better fit, I will tell you that in the long run, you will land more projects because of this. If you are just there to be there for your client and the person sitting across from you and just listen to them, it will change everything for you. Just be curious, keep asking why. So really, if you just go in and find out why are we creating this project? Why was it being requested? Is it serving at some type of purpose? What are you trying to do? How will you know it's going to be a success? If you just keep asking questions and being curious about what they're requesting of you, even that alone is going to help them question what they're requesting of you and if it's really the right thing to create. Because in the end, strategy is an approach and it's a mindset versus a list of exercises versus a process. Those things help and those things are very good to know, but you first have to have that mindset of curiosity and being present and being free of assumptions before you can use any type of framework. So the skills required, really, it's listening, it's communication, it's empathy, and it's connecting dots for your client. And really connecting dots, if you're creative, you most likely already are doing creative problem solving. This is just another way to use your creative problem solving abilities. So things like, I don't know, or I'll know it when I see it, will end up turning into, we trust you and you get us. I had a client say this to me one time after we did the strategy workshop, and then I was presenting the identity. And I said, did I hit the mark? Did I miss the mark? Where are you guys at? What are you thinking? And she's like, oh, we trust you. You totally get us. You understand us. And I keep hearing that from clients when I do these workshops. They feel so understood. And then I get their business. I get what they're trying to do and where they're going, that I end up showing one direction for a logo and identity, and they go with it. And it's unreal to me because I used to have that issue like my friend where they're like, well, just give me 3 quick and dirty 90-minute options. But because we've done all of this groundwork, that by the time we get to identity, they go, yeah, you totally get it. That's what it should be. We trust you. And it's this, there's so much more trust in the relationship than previously when I was just really taking orders from them. Then things like just give me something that looks good will turn into, this will help us reach our goals. We know that what we're creating is actually going to get us somewhere versus just wanting it to look good. Now, that's not to say that it's bad to create things that look good. Some people, that is the goal. But for the most part, if you're working with businesses, they are trying to reach business goals and they are investing money in this. And if they don't know what the goal is that they're reaching, it's going to be an expense because they can't track whether or not that they got a return of their investment. And what you want is to turn expenses into investments for them. They need to invest to get to certain goals. And so if they don't have goals, it's just going to be an expense, and then they're going to pay you less than what you should get. So recap of what we just talked about. A lack of a common goal between you and your client leads to a purposeless design, and purposeless design leads to being to an order taker, or maybe it's all the way around, it's chicken or egg. Brand strategy workshops align everyone towards a common goal, and the brand strategy is an approach first before framework. The framework helps, but it's really your mindset going into this. And great strategists come in completely empty, completely void of any assumptions, or I don't even do research beforehand. I come in completely empty to the workshop to learn and ask questions because I expect my client is going to be the expert on their business. And then in the end, I would practice the soft skills of being a really good listener, learning how to communicate, being empathetic, more than the hard skills. The hard skills are useful, like I said, the learning of the process, learning of the framework, but really, I would put more emphasis on learning. If you're having issues with the whole subjective feedback and the purposeless design, I would learn more communication, empathy, coaching. So like the coaching habit, I would read Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. If you want to learn practical empathy, I would read more books or learn more things about communication, and that will be a great starting point for you if you are interested in transitioning into something like this. So that is the end of my talk, but I would love to answer any questions you guys have. And thank you.
Thank you. That was great. I have one question off the top, which is when you go in with questions, and I love the fact that you don't do the research on the client beforehand. I think that that's great. When you go in, do you have like a list, a ton of questions you ask, or just one or two that then leads to other things?
Yeah, I do go in with a framework, as I kept saying, no framework, but I have a framework, but I don't necessarily force it. But what I do is I start with the question, why are we here? What is your goal? What can we help you get to or accomplish? Even if they've already told me that in a sales meeting, I have them reiterate it so that we're always looking back at that goal, always reframing. Then once I know their goal, I usually will ask them their vision. So where are we long-term looking at as far as like, are you looking to sell the business at the long run? So bigger picture. And then from there, once I know what we're aiming at, then I'll choose what exercises will help us get there. So sometimes I do like an assumption reversal exercise if they're wanting to disrupt a marketplace. So we'll do something like that. If they are having issues attracting the right customer, we'll talk about that and potentially do something with the super fan or the ideal client. So it just depends on what their goal is, and then I'll look at all my exercises and go through them. But typically it's the goal, and then we go through the brand, then we go through the super fan, and at the very end, we end off with action steps. So all of this, and we do a customer journey as well. So knowing all of this, what do we have to create moving forward? But it's not, that's the rough outline, but it changes depending on what the client goal is.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Jenny?
Hi, Melinda. Thanks so much. I listened to the other recordings that you did with the CR, and one of the things that I loved the most was that your journey felt very much like my journey over the last decade. And I've even said, even in the DR, if they roll CR, if they remember, like, how do you sell? Wait, you're going to pay me to think versus paying me to give you something like that tangible. So you helped me gain that confidence that, yeah, you can do that. Right. And your process is very similar. It's funny, I have some of my boards in the back that I have done with clients, and what I've evolved since listening to those other recordings is it's funny, you called it roadmap, and I used to do a MAPS program. So I copied that from you. Hope you don't care. I call it a brand roadmap.
No, go for it.
And I give that now to, I package it all. I call it brand therapy or brand discovery, to really dig deep into it, to answer those questions of, no, you don't just need a postcard. You need a full-fledged campaign for whatever, right? So I feel like I've been doing all those things. That's what's made me successful. That's what's brought me into retainers. And that's great. But here are my two challenges that I'd love your feedback on. And because I was digging for your brand business versus the coaching business to see if I could find some answers. But one is, you mentioned in some of your interviews that you charge upwards of $10,000 for that service. And I struggle with that for not just COVID, like take COVID out of it. I'm in a small market. I'm north of Pittsburgh in a small community that $10,000 is hard for people. And if they do spend it, they're spending it on a whole big business strategic plan with full-fledged firms. So I struggle with how to figure out how my piece, because my piece fuels that tool, right? So I struggle with the price. I struggle with hitting into like the Pittsburgh, the Cleveland, the Buffaloes, which could be a whole coaching thing. So I'm just sprinkling out. The other one that because I think this could be a twofold answer, is when I go through those questions in that journey and the discovery sessions, right, what I end up revealing often are operational problems.
Mm.
You know, like it's one thing to create a campaign and to build database growth and awareness and increase sales, but then they reveal that we can't answer the phone fast enough and we can't turn around projects fast enough. Like and I'm like, yeah, good, right? I made your sales grow that much more and you can't handle it. I wish I had that business consultant to be like, okay, you're growing too fast now. You got to call Susie to help you iron out the wrinkles inside. And because when that roadblock happens, all marketing goes on pause.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've got a
So
Susie for
pricing and operational. Yeah, tell me,
Yeah.
school me.
you. Well, I said I've got a Susie for you, but go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah, I was going to ask
Okay.
Jenny, what is do you have a specific question as far as the operational issues?
maybe the specific part of that is, do you hit those kind of roadblocks in your strategic sessions with them, and how do you help them navigate that part? Because that's off your bucket, right? Like that's not your job to help them fix internal processes. So how do you navigate them into solutions? Do you have a Susie, Nancy, or you know, how do you navigate that part?
Yeah, great questions. And I'm going to just ask a couple follow-up questions as far as price. Who are you targeting currently? Your local area?
My local area, because,
Okay.
and really this is why I've re-upped as a member. Well, one of the reasons why I re-upped as a member, because I've recognized that in order for me to get even close to that kind of number for this tool that I know I do well, I got to put my big girl pants on and not be afraid of competition when I go into those bigger markets. And I think that's what always makes me nervous. Like there's nobody in my town, my county doing brand strategy. Like they're media buying and they're telling you need to do this thing, but nobody's listening.
Okay, let her answer because we need to give other people time. Yeah,
I know, I do
setting,
that. I'm
setting
sorry.
you up. Go ahead.
Great questions. And so instead of digging further, I'll give you the best answer I possibly can with the info I have. So with the market and the price, completely understandable that, you know, people are probably not looking for that or might not be looking for that in certain markets. What I would look for, whether that is if you still look local or if you go somewhere else and go into those bigger markets, I encourage you to look for people who have big goals, who are willing to invest in those goals versus just people who have the budget or look like they don't have the budget. I wouldn't make an assumption either way, because someone who has a big goal that is willing to invest to get there will, like, they might look different. Like I think I might have mentioned this on another Creative Roundtable, but I had a client come to me who was a lawyer who wanted to switch into being a blogger full time. And I got referred to her from a social media strategist. And she's like, I can't work with you until you have a strategy. I'm not going to do that. Well, this lady, I was like, I don't know if we should do this. And she's like, I have tried everything else. I need to do something else. And she ended up paying $5,000 to have a plan for her to switch into doing blogging. And to her, that goal was huge. That was a whole career pivot change for her. And she needed some help in getting there. And so it's less about really the market and all that, how we're used to looking at it. And it's more of go find people with big goals who aren't just dreamers, but who are actually willing to invest in getting there. And that might require joining different kinds of business groups, whether that's online or in your local area. But there might be even one person that you know of in your local area that does have a big goal and they don't know how to get there and they do need some help. Maybe not. And that might require you to go outside of your current pool. But I guarantee you that the wider you cast your net here, there are people that will invest in this. I mean, like I said, I even invest in strategy as a strategist myself. So it really depends on just having big goals. I And then this goes into the second question about operational problems. Yes, I uncover the weirdest things in strategy, like things I tell my client, like, you need to personally go work this out. Like, you might need therapy, like, not in a bad way, but like, this might be something that's affecting your business. But weird stuff will come up in brand strategy, and those operational problems, I would definitely get someone who, whatever the problem is that you uncover, have someone you can either say, hey, I have this person that I know I can refer you to, or work out some type of referral relationship where you get a referral bonus I do that all the time too. You get a referral bonus for referring this person. Then they can also refer people to you as well. I would start forming relationships with people who are serving a similar audience as you in a different way. So that could be business consultants, that could be people who do complete like processes, that they create those and run them, maybe even for businesses. But because the range of businesses I work with, they go from single man shows to they have teams of 20. And it just depends on what their resources are too. But I would encourage you to form relationships and connections with people who are serving people in a different way, like marketing consultants, social media strategists, business consultants, and start referring work to each other, or go out and say, hey, you know what? I don't know how you can implement this right now. I know that's the problem you need to solve, but let me see what I can do and what I can dig up, and then I'll refer you as I can. So.
And taking some of your words would be a great promotion, which is, do you have big goals? I can help you get there.
That's what I was going to say. I think that the big takeaway from my big convoluted question and your answer was to attract people who have big goals and willing to invest to get there. I think to use that language is really going to help connect.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Any other questions? Nadine?
Yeah, I've got a few, but I'll just start with one. When it comes to setting up these strategy sessions, how do you determine who's involved in them? Because obviously you have your main point of contact, but there's other stakeholders in a lot of cases. And what if they want like everybody in that meeting, which I can imagine would be a gong show. So how do you control that environment?
Yeah, that has happened. Who's involved? Decision makers. The bigger the goal or the bigger problem that you solve for a company, the higher up the food chain you're going to be going. So if you solve a huge problem, you're going to be sitting with the CEO, the CFO, the CMO, the C-suite. You're going to be sitting with them, the higher or the bigger the issue. As it gets to be not that big of a problem that you're solving, then you'll maybe just be sitting with the CMO and maybe their team. So first off, I would say, how big is the problem and who is the decision maker? Who's going to have final say? Highly suggest getting the decision makers in the room. Like, that is the goal. Get the decision makers in the room. I understand though, that's not always possible, especially if you guys are working for nonprofits. A lot of times you just get the communications director, the CMO, and they have to go get the buy-off from the board. And I'm actually currently doing that right now. So I'm working with a power company. It's a co-op, and they have to go get approval from the board members. And that's just how it's going to go. And okay, that's going to work. If they want everybody in there, that use your discretion on that. But I would say decision makers and maybe one extra person who has information that no one else does. Like if they've been at the company a really long time, you can have an expert in there of the subject matter if you need to. But you have to realize that you are facilitating this meeting. So like you have to understand too that you're going to have to ask for, I usually ask for control of the room, especially from the leader. So if it's a CEO is in the room, I ask for permission to lead so I can call them out if they're on their phone. Like I want the power in the room. I want to be given that. And then I can play teacher and tell them to stop being on their phone, or that if they would like to take a break, we can. But so that you end up being not the order taker and more of the consultant. And that I think just comes over time, but I would say use your discretion on who all's going to be in there.
Laura, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. So what do you provide the client with at the end of the workshop? Is it sort of a executive summary or a roadmap document or?
Yeah, I do. So I call it a roadmap. I think people call it different things, and it summarizes what we did in the meeting, and it usually includes reiterating the goals, positioning, because usually positioning is the most important thing we're pulling out. We're trying to understand what's the position in the minds of the customers that the brand is taking up, and are we disrupting a marketplace? So positioning will probably brand attributes, the mission statement, and anything about the brand that we need to know. If there's a backstory, if there's a tagline that we're creating for them. And then it will go over a summary of the ideal client or super fan. And I'll usually pull visuals to represent what we uncovered in the meeting. I pull visuals for, and I said, this is what I'm seeing. This is who I believe that we're targeting. Is this who you saw in your head when we were talking about it? So I'm trying to pull as many visuals as possible to communicate the words that we uncovered in the workshop. And then sometimes I do overviews of funnels as well, so a customer journey. So I do tap into marketing a bit, so that I might have some pages on there of like, what's the problem and what's our solution, and what's happening during this stage of the journey, which could then be given to a marketing director or whatnot, strategist. And then at the very end, there's messaging in there too. And then at the end, it's a list of, here's what needs to be done in the next 3 months. And I usually break it down into month 1, this is what needs to be accomplished, month 2, month 3. And I try to boil it down as simplified as possible in this document, because if they're going to use it to give it to a strategist or give it to their teammates, it needs to be usable and it needs to be easily digestible. So it's simplified a lot from the workshop, but it's a document, it's a PDF document, really.
So is messaging actually coming out of those sessions? Usable messaging?
Yeah. A lot of times, the fun part about this is finding the usable messaging, and it's typically coming out of the mouth of the founder. So they talk about why they started it and who they're helping, and even just the terms they use and how they say it. And their own personality is typically infused a bit into the brand, and I'm able to take some of exactly what they say and use it as we call it, hero messaging or top line messaging that we end up putting in the document. Or it comes out a lot during the exercises that we do in the customer journey, knowing what does this customer need at this point in time, and what can we say to them? What do they need to hear from us? And so we'll have a customer journey, and I'll actually have messaging examples in the journey at each place to say, this is what we could say. And it might not be exact, it needs to go to a copywriter, but at least this is what we could say during this time of the journey. So yeah, a lot of it is coming out of that workshop.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
I think,
go ahead.
This one should be short. Just curious, so obviously with Zoom, it's probably a lot easier to just hit record and capture all the info, but in an in-person meeting, I mean, I know myself when I'm trying to write things down, like it's hard to maintain a flow and eye contact, and then you're lucky if you can read what you wrote later. So do you have a recorder, or do you have like a video? Like what's your method for capturing all the info?
Yeah. For in-person meetings, I will do it very similar to how I do Zoom meetings. So I'll bring my computer, I'll have my document, my workshop document that I have it in Keynote, and I will hook it up to an HDMI. So usually there's a screen there. I'll hook it up there, and then I don't know if I've recorded, because it's been a while since I did in person, but you can screen record on there. I believe we had a camera set up in the corner for one of them. And then sometimes I'll switch between computer and whiteboard, or if we have a big paper we want to write on, or Post-it notes that we want to use. And then I'll just end up taking photos of those and transcribing them into a document later. So there's that. And sometimes, like one time I had a meeting with, and it was 8 people. So it was all the decision makers and extras and all that. And I brought another strategist with me, because I was scared that was going to happen. I wasn't going to capture everything. So I said, can you just keep watch of things and hear things, hopefully, that I may have missed? And so they also took notes. So that also helps too. If you have a lot of things going on, bring an assistant with you, and then they can watch the room as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
One more quick question. So I'm more interested in what you're doing with Zoom now, because I've led several in-person strategy sessions where I've written on, you know, the large Post-it notes and things like that, and also passed out handouts and kind of exercises and things. So how do you deal with that during Zoom?
Yeah, I try not to have more than 2 people on the client side come. And I know could be possibly impossible. I've done it with more, and it was difficult to manage the room. You just don't have the same management of energy and people when there's multiple people there. So I try to have 2 to 3 tops on the client side there. And I don't do any of the, you know, the extra stuff of like passing out things that they can do. So we're doing it all together. The other thing I'm starting to do, which is actually really fun, is using this thing called Miro, Miro, and it's a digital whiteboard, and you can use Post-its on it. You can set up boards ahead of time. So I'm working on transferring what I do typically in a keynote to a Miro board, and then everyone can join in and we can work through a workshop together. And so I'm working on that, and I've done it for different types of workshops. We've done it with up to, I think, like 30 people, and they've all participated and they work on things. So if you wanted to have people work on their own thing for a little bit, or do something like anything, if you know of AJ and Smart with lightning decision jams, or you want a group activity, I highly suggest getting on a digital whiteboard and creating whatever exercises you want, and you can run timers, and it ends up being really fun. Idea. So if you have more than 3 people, I would say definitely use something like a digital whiteboard.
We actually did we had a design thinking workshop and used a tool. So that's in our recorded sessions as well, Laura, if you want to look back at our past ones. So we are almost at the end of time, 1 minute. Does anyone else have a last question? So I would just like to ask one question for someone who is here, but probably doesn't know that I think that this applies, which is that they're working on a website, and you know, everything was decided and the client liked their style, and that's why they hired them. And then they are trying to strip all the design out of the website, similar to what you said in the very beginning. So how would you approach something like that?
Yeah, that one's hard because you already went through the whole process and then you ended up there. What I would say is somehow salvaging that relationship and asking the client why. First off, why do you want to change everything? Why do you want to strip it? What are you trying to aim at? Like what are you trying to accomplish, to try and understand what's going on, of why they might be changing it. I mean, first off, I would just find out why. That's what I would do in that situation, so that you can understand what's going on, and then how can you help them get to that goal. So like really just understanding what's going on first, and then going from there.
Okay. I think that a lot of times clients just, you know, want to be copycats of other people, and that's always a difficult thing for people like us.
Right. And that's where I say work on your own positioning as a designer and strategist, so that you attract people who do know how to set goals, who do understand that they might have some subjective feedback, but that they're going to hold it because they are putting their goals above their own feelings.
And I think in your first time you spoke to us, you talked about people within the group doing strategy for one another, which would help pull out really what they should be talking about, which is a really great idea. You also mentioned to me that you have a strategy group starting up. Is that still?
Yeah. So I've launched, I have a brand strategy boot camp, and I've run it twice, and it's turning into a self-study with a community aspect. So there's a lot of Q&As. It's like once a week you'd hop into a Q&A or coaching. I have other coaches that are in there too. And that is going to be launching, as long as all things go well, in the next couple of weeks. It'll be back up.
Okay. And if you send me that information, I could send it to everyone in the group.
Will do.
Great.
Will do.
Well, thank you very much. This was, as usual, fantastic.
Thank you. I appreciate you asking me back for the 3rd time. It's an honor.
It was great.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
I
everybody.
unmuted everyone so you could say goodbye.
Thank you.
Or you want.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, it's nice seeing you guys.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.